Some people think getting old means you've run out of power. They see shaky hands and slow steps, and forget those same hands once held rifles, stitched wounds, steered families through storms, and built the world they now stand on. So when a pack of bikers surrounded a 100-year-old veteran in a quiet diner booth, they mistook age for weakness, a mistake many make only once. They didn't know she still remembered one number by heart, the one belonging to a man who owed her everything. And when he walked through that door, those bikers were about to learn why elders are never to be disrespected. Before we continue, thank you so much for watching and supporting these stories. If you enjoy emotional, cinematic narratives where courage comes in unexpected forms and justice arrives quietly but powerfully, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support truly helps us keep creating these meaningful stories. Now, let's get back to it. There was a quiet rhythm to the diner at the edge of Willow Creek, the same squeak of the door hinges, the same clink of chipped coffee cups, the same hum of the old refrigerator that had somehow outlived half the town. It wasn't a fancy place. It wasn't even a good place by most standards, but it was steady, dependable, a small island where time slowed just enough for people to breathe. That was why Evelyn Harper liked it. At 100 years old, Evelyn moved slower now, her cane tapping gently against the linoleum floor, her steps careful but steady, her silver hair pinned neatly in the same bun she'd worn since her 30s. Most people in town knew her simply as Miss Evelyn. Few knew the truth behind her medals. Fewer understood the weight she carried from a world long gone, and almost none realized how fiercely she had once defended her country. She didn't advertise it. She didn't need to. Her life had been full, rich, and loud enough in her younger days. Now, in her twilight years, she preferred quiet corners, warm tea, and the comfort of routine. Every morning at 8:15 sharp, Evelyn ordered the same thing: oatmeal with cinnamon, 2 slices of toast, and a mug of hot water with lemon. She sat in booth 4 not because it was special, but because it faced the window and let her watch the sunrise over the empty fields beyond. She had earned her peace. But peace does not always get to choose who finds it. That morning began like all the others, with soft country music playing from the radio, the scent of frying eggs drifting through the air, and the distant putter of an old truck outside. Evelyn folded her napkin carefully in her lap and stirred her lemon water with the tip of her spoon. Her hands trembled a little. They often did these days. Age had a way of doing that. "Morning, Miss Evelyn," called Marla, the waitress who'd worked there for 2 decades. "Cold out there today." "Cold enough to wake up the bones," Evelyn said with a gentle smile, "but nothing worth complaining about. I've seen colder." "You've seen everything," Marla teased. "Not everything," Evelyn murmured, "but enough." Marla chuckled and went back to the counter. Outside, the road remained still, quiet as it always was on a weekday morning. Only 2 trucks passed by in the first half hour. A few regulars drifted in and out, offering Evelyn a nod or a warm hello. She returned each with the same soft courtesy she had cultivated over a century of living. Then at 9:03 the stillness broke. A deep, rumbling growl echoed from down the road, the unmistakable thunder of motorcycle engines. Not 1, not 2. 5. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a town this small, this old, this gentle. Marla's head snapped up as she wiped the counter. Earl, the retired mechanic reading a newspaper near the door, lowered his glasses and peered out the window. "That doesn't sound like any local boys," he muttered. "No," Marla whispered, "those are." The bikers turned off the main road and pulled into the gravel lot with a spray of dust. Their engines rumbled like a threat. All 5 wore black leather jackets marked with a symbol no one in Willow Creek recognized, a skull wrapped in barbed wire, wings stretching out like talons. Their helmets were matte black, their boots heavy, their movements confident in a way that said they weren't worried about consequences. "Not here, not anywhere." They dismounted slowly, cracking jokes among themselves. One lit a cigarette. Another punched his friend's arm and laughed. Their presence alone changed the atmosphere of the diner, as if the air tightened, waiting to see whether they came for trouble or merely passed through. But trouble has a way of choosing its destination. The tallest of them, broad shoulders, neck tattoos creeping up his jaw, pushed open the diner door first. The bell above it jingled awkwardly, out of place with the low thud of his boots. The others followed, spreading out like predators surveying fresh territory. Marla straightened her apron and forced a polite smile. "Mornin', coffee." They didn't answer her. They looked around, saw the empty booths, the old man reading his paper, a couple in the corner sharing pancakes. Then they saw Evelyn, alone, small, frail, 100 years old. The perfect target. The tallest one grinned. "Well, look what we've got here, a little antique." His friends chuckled. Evelyn did not look up from her oatmeal. Her spoon moved slowly, steady despite her trembling hand. She had faced worse than rude boys in leather jackets. Much worse. Marla stepped forward, voice firm. "Gentlemen, there's plenty of open seats. Take any booth you like." "We like that one," another biker said, pointing directly at Evelyn. Evelyn looked up then, her eyes pale blue but sharp, still sharp enough to see men like these for what they were. "I'm sitting here," she said gently, with the kind of politeness that only came from an upbringing built on respect. The tallest biker leaned over her table, placing one palm flat on the surface. "We noticed," he said, "but maybe you're done eating. You old folks take forever." Evelyn's spine remained straight. "I'm not done." He chuckled. "What's your name, Grandma?" Marla moved quickly. "That's enough. You don't talk to her like that." The tallest biker didn't bother looking at Marla. His eyes stayed on Evelyn, waiting for a reaction. Evelyn didn't give him one. Instead she said, "My name is Evelyn Harper. I served in the Women's Army Corps in 1943. I've lived through wars, depressions, and the loss of every person I once knew. So if you think you can intimidate me, you are mistaken." The diner fell silent. For a second, just one, the biker hesitated. Then he laughed loud, cruel. "Oh, she's a tough one," he said, looking at his crew. 100 years old and still got some spark." "I'm 101, Evelyn corrected softly. His grin widened. "Even better." He grabbed her lemon water and dumped it on the floor. Marla gasped. Several customers stood from their seats, unsure whether to intervene or freeze. Evelyn looked down at her empty mug, then back at the man towering over her. Her voice remained steady. "Young man, that was unnecessary." He leaned closer, breath reeking of cigarettes. "We're not here to be necessary." His friend, shorter, with a thick beard and chain bracelets, pulled the napkin dispenser off her table and let it crash to the floor. Earl the mechanic stood up. "Hey," he barked, "that's enough, leave the lady alone." The tallest biker turned his head slowly toward Earl. "Sit down, old man, before you fall down." Earl didn't sit. But he did step back, realizing quickly that these men weren't just bullies. They enjoyed the fear they created. Another biker, blonde hair, a scar running from eyebrow to cheek, pointed at Evelyn's cane. "What's this, Grandma? Your weapon?" He snatched it before she could stop him and waved it like a trophy. Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap, her breathing tightened. But she stayed calm, composed, even as the men laughed, tossing the cane between them. Marla stepped in front of Evelyn. "Give her cane back right now, you have no right." The tallest biker shoved her aside. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to send a message. Evelyn's eyes darkened. "Enough," she whispered. But the men didn't hear her. Or they didn't care. The tallest biker pulled up a chair and sat opposite Evelyn, arms folded, smirk widening. "Tell me, Granny, what are you gonna do? Call the cops? Call your knitting club?" The others laughed. Evelyn reached slowly into her purse. Her movements were deliberate, fragile, age softened. But inside those hands lived a century of strength. She opened a small flip phone, outdated, scratched, held together with tape. It was practically a relic. The bearded biker snorted. "What's that, a museum piece?" Evelyn didn't answer. She pressed a number. Just one. A number she'd memorized years ago. A number she never thought she'd have to use again. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Steady. Grounded. Familiar. "Evelyn, you all right?" Her eyes softened. "Jason, I'm sorry to bother you." "You never bother me," Jason said quietly. "Where are you?" "I'm at the diner," she whispered, "and I seem to be outnumbered." Jason didn't speak for a moment. When he did, the bikers heard the edge in his voice, even from across the table. "I'm on my way." Evelyn closed the phone gently and set it beside her plate. The tallest biker blinked. "Jason, who the hell is Jason?" Evelyn didn't answer. She simply folded her hands and waited. The bearded biker laughed. "What's he gonna do? Walk in here and save you, please? You don't scare us, Grandma." Evelyn finally looked up. And for the first time since they'd entered, her eyes showed emotion, not fear. "Conviction." "Son," she said softly, "you should be very scared." The tallest biker rolled his eyes. "Yeah, and why's that?" Evelyn took a slow breath. "Because," she said, "I saved his life once, and he promised he'd return the favor." The laughter died. Not quickly. Not all at once. But slowly, the way a wildfire fades when rain begins to fall. The tallest biker's expression shifted. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because the bell above the diner door jingled. Softly, calmly, and every head in the room turned as a man stepped inside, quiet as a shadow, steady as a heartbeat, his expression unreadable, his presence unmistakable. Jasonstatham. He didn't look at the customers. He didn't look at Marla. He didn't look at Earl or at the booths or the counter. His eyes went directly to Evelyn. "Sorry I took so long," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Traffic was thicker than usual." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're right on time." Jason nodded once. Then his gaze shifted slowly, deliberately, to the 5 bikers surrounding her. And the diner went very, very still. The tallest biker stood, trying to puff himself up. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" Jason didn't answer. Not yet. He stepped forward, rolling his shoulders once, a silent reminder that some men don't need introductions. Some men are introductions. Evelyn rested her hands gently on the table. "You boys," she said softly, "are about to learn the meaning of respect." Jason's expression didn't change. But the room felt different. Tighter, heavier, like the air itself recognized him. The bikers didn't know it yet. But the moment he walked through that door, their day changed. Their fate changed. And the lesson they were about to learn, it would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Jason didn't have to raise his voice to fill the room. His presence did that on its own. He walked further into the diner, boots quiet against the worn floor. Outside, the motorcycles still ticked as their engines cooled, the last echoes of their arrival fading into the air. Inside, the air changed again, the way it does when a storm moves over a small town and people sense the shift before the first drop of rain. He stopped beside Evelyn's booth. "Morning, Evelyn," he said softly. "Morning, Jason," she replied, as if this were any other day and not a moment where 5 men towered over her like shadows. Marla stood behind the counter, frozen, a coffee pot still in her hand. Earl shifted his weight, torn between sitting down like a sensible old man and standing his ground like the one he used to be. The tallest biker sized Jason up, eyes flicking over the lines of his shoulders, the calm set of his jaw, the way his hands stayed loose at his sides. "You're the one she called?" he asked. Jason kept his eyes on Evelyn a heartbeat longer before he turned to the man. "Yeah." The biker smirked. "You her grandson or something?" "No," Jason said. "I'm someone who listens when she asks for help." The bearded biker scoffed. "Cute. You hear that, boys? Granny's got herself a guard dog." The blonde biker with the scar tapped the cane he still held. "Maybe he wants this back. You two can hobble out together." Their laughter spread across the diner, loud, forced, a little too sharp around the edges. Jason's gaze dropped to the cane, then rose slowly back to the scarred biker's face. "That's hers," he said calmly. "You're going to put it back on the table, gently." The biker lifted the cane as if considering it. "Or what?" Jason didn't move. "Or you're going to regret the way this day goes for you," he said quietly. The tallest biker stepped closer, boots stopping just in front of Jason's. He was broader by a bit, taller by an inch, younger by a couple of decades. He used all of that like armor. "And what exactly are you gonna do?" he asked. "You see how many of us there are. This isn't the movies, old man. You're outnumbered. You walk in here alone, you walk out on a stretcher." Jason's eyes didn't waver. "Last time I checked, outnumbered doesn't always mean outmatched." The bearded one laughed, a harsh sound. "You hear this guy thinks he's a hero." Jason gave the smallest shrug. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who doesn't like watching cowards pick on a woman who's seen more life than all of you combined." The tallest biker's eyes hardened. "You got a name, big shot." Jason held his gaze. "Jason." "Jason what?" He paused for a moment, not dramatic, just honest. "Jasonstatham." The name hung in the air for a second. Earl's eyes widened. Marla's hand tightened around the coffee pot. The bikers didn't recognize it at first. To them, it was just a name, a man, another obstacle to push past. "Never heard of you," the tall one sneered, "but you're about to remember us." He reached out and shoved Jason in the shoulder, not lightly, not a test. A full shove meant to make him stumble, meant to show everyone who owned the room. Jason didn't stumble. He barely moved. The biker's hand bounced off him like he'd tried to push a tree trunk. Jason inhaled through his nose once, sharp and controlled. If he was irritated, it didn't show in his face. It only showed in the way his eyes cooled a degree. He turned his head slightly back to Evelyn. "You okay?" he asked her. She nodded. "I've been worse, but I'd like my cane back." Jason looked at the scarred biker again. "You heard her," he said. "Cane table now." Scar shook his head, smirking. "You're not in charge here, man." Jason's voice didn't rise. "You sure?" The tall one shoved him again, harder this time. "What, you want us to say sorry, put a napkin on the floor, kiss her hand, maybe beg, ain't happening." He leaned in close enough that Jason could smell the stale smoke and cheap whiskey on his breath. "This is how it works," the biker said. "We go where we want, we do what we want. And old people," he jerked his chin toward Evelyn, "don't tell us otherwise." Jason studied him, eyes calm, expression unreadable. "You finish?" he asked. The biker blinked. "What?" "Are you finished?" Jason repeated. "Because I'm only going to say this one more time." He took a breath, not for himself, but to make sure the words came out evenly. "You're going to apologize to her," he said quietly. "You're going to give her cane back. You're going to pick up what you threw on the floor, and then you're going to leave." The diner was so silent you could hear the hum of the fridge over the counter. The bearded biker burst out laughing. "He's serious. He's actually serious." Scar spun the cane in his hand. "Tell you what, why don't you get on your knees and ask nice, huh?" Evelyn shook her head once. "Boys don't do this." They didn't listen. Bullies rarely did. The tall biker straightened up, rolling his shoulders, cracking his knuckles like he was warming up for a show. "You got 3 seconds to walk back out that door," he said, pointing toward it. "After that, we stop playing." Jason's tone didn't change. "I'm not the one who should be counting." The biker smirked. "1." Jason's gaze slid briefly to the clock above the counter, as if he were just checking the time. 2. Jason's stance didn't change, balanced, relaxed, ready. 3. The tall biker swung. It wasn't a warning tap or a shove this time. It was a full, wild punch aimed straight at Jason's jaw, backed by weight and anger, and the need to prove something. Jason stepped in, not back. His left hand came up, deflecting the punch past his head. His right hand snapped forward, open-palmed, catching the biker's chest and using his own momentum against him. The bigger man stumbled, his boots skidding on the worn floor. Jason hooked his foot behind the biker's heel and turned his hips. The tall man crashed onto his back with a thud that shook the salt shakers on the tables. The entire diner flinched. Before the others could process what had happened, Jason stepped between them and Evelyn's booth, not towering, not puffed up, just placed. A barrier, a line. The bearded biker lunged next, swinging the cane like a bat. Jason ducked under the arc, caught the cane mid-swing, and twisted. The biker's wrist snapped downward, and the cane flew from his grip, clattering across the floor toward the counter. Marla jumped as it slid past her. Jason straightened, holding the bearded biker's wrist just long enough to stop him from swinging again. He didn't break it. He didn't even twist it hard enough to cause real damage. He just reminded him with quiet pressure how easily he could have. "Sit down," Jason said. It wasn't a shout. It was an instruction. The biker's knees bent before his brain had time to argue. He dropped onto the nearest stool, breathing hard, eyes wide. Scar came next. He didn't attack head-on. He moved around the side looking for a blind spot. It was instinct, the kind men learn in places where fights don't come with rules. Jason saw it in the reflection of the napkin dispenser. Scar reached for a knife at his belt, not big, not a showpiece. Practical. Jason turned slightly, stepping into Scar's movement instead of away from it. He grabbed the man's wrist before the blade cleared its sheath, twisted it up and back, and pinned it against Scar's shoulder. The biker hissed in pain, his fingers reflexively loosening. The knife dropped. Jason kicked it under the counter. "You don't bring weapons into a place where people are just trying to eat breakfast," he said quietly. "That line bother you at all?" Scar gritted his teeth. "Get off me." Jason held him there a heartbeat longer, making sure the lesson sank deeper than the joint pain, then released him. Scar staggered backward, clutching his arm, the fight draining out of him. Two bikers remained against the far wall, near the window. They hadn't moved yet, not out of mercy, but out of calculation. They were still trying to decide if this was a fight they could win. Jason looked at them. "You want to join in?" he asked calmly, "or have you seen enough?" One of them swallowed hard. "We don't want trouble, man." Jason nodded once. "Then you're already smarter than your friend." The tall biker groaned from the floor, rolling onto his side. His pride had taken a harder hit than his body. He pushed himself up on one elbow, eyes blazing with humiliation. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You have any idea who we ride with? You twist my arm, make me look weak in front of my boys, and think we just walk away." He grabbed hold of the nearest chair and pulled himself to his feet, staggering. There was blood on his lip now, his tattoos shifting with the flexing of his jaw. He jabbed a finger toward Evelyn. "This is her fault," he said, "if she just moved." Jason stepped between them again. "Don't," he said. "Man, she's nothing," the leader snapped. "She's 100, she's done, why are you even?" "Watch your mouth," Jason said, and there was something different in his tone now. Not rage, not threat. History. The kind that sits behind someone's eyes and doesn't need to be explained. "Why?" the biker demanded. "What is she to you?" Jason held his stare. "She's the reason I'm alive," he said simply. Evelyn's eyes glistened, just a little. The room quieted again, for a different reason this time. The bearded biker frowned. "What's he talking about?" Jason didn't look away from the leader. "You remember the war they teach you about in history books?" he asked him. "The one with black and white pictures you scroll past because they don't flash enough." The biker said nothing. "I was 23, Jason said. Different uniform, different country, different desert. We were hit hard. I got pulled out with a chest full of shrapnel and not a lot of time." He glanced at Evelyn. "She was on the medical team that received us," he continued. "You know what it's like to wake up in a field hospital, lungs burning, not sure which way is up, and see someone look at you like you're not just another body." Evelyn's hands folded tighter. "You were so pale," she murmured. "I thought you wouldn't make it through the night." "You made sure I did," Jason said. "You talked to me, kept me awake. You yelled at a doctor who wanted to move on. You put your hands on my chest and told me I'd live whether I liked it or not." That earned the smallest smile from Evelyn. "You were stubborn even then." Jason inclined his head. "And you were terrifying." A soft chuckle rippled around the room, a small release of tension that didn't erase it but shifted it. Jason looked at the bikers again. "She didn't know my name," he said. "Didn't care where I came from, what I'd done, whether I'd ever earn a dime. She just saw a young man who might have a life ahead of him, and she decided it was worth saving." He took a step closer to the leader. "You think you're tough?" he asked quietly. "Try being 19 and walking wounded through a war zone. Try holding a man's hand while he dies and then moving on to the next one because there's no time to grieve. Try doing that day after day, and then coming home to a world that forgets what you did the minute the headlines change." The leader's jaw clenched. Jason's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. "This woman lived through things you can't imagine," he said. "And you walk into her mourning, into her peace, into the last years of a life she gave in service to people she never met, and you dump her drink, steal her cane, and call her nothing." He let the words hang there. "Tell me again," he said quietly, "who's weak?" None of the bikers answered. Earl shifted his weight again, his voice low but steady. "He's right, son." The bearded biker stared at Evelyn with different eyes now, not romantic, not worshipful, just human. He seemed to see the lines on her face differently, like they were pages instead of cracks. The tall leader looked away for the first time since Jason walked in. His chest heaved. His pride screamed at him to swing again, to reclaim authority, to not walk away from a public humiliation. But his instincts, the ones that had kept him alive in other bad decisions, whispered something else. He swallowed hard. "This ain't over," he muttered, but it sounded weak even to him. Jason tilted his head. "Does it need to be?" The leader looked at him sharply. "You got a choice," Jason said. "Right now, you can double down, call more men, make this bigger, but that road doesn't end where you think it does, or—" He glanced at Evelyn. "You can realize that 10 minutes in a diner doesn't have to define the rest of your life." The leader's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you can do something today you probably haven't done in years," Jason said. "You can take responsibility." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. "This isn't about fear," Jason added. "This is about respect. You walked in here looking for entertainment. You found a woman who saw more war before you were born than you'll ever see in all your little bar fights. You found someone I owe my life to, and you had a choice what you did with that." He nodded toward the spilled lemon water, the napkins on the floor, the cane near the counter. "You chose wrong." Silence pressed against the walls. Evelyn watched the leader carefully, not with hatred, not with disdain, with something much harder to bear. Hope. Faint but real. The leader's hand flexed at his side. He took a slow breath. Then, to everyone's surprise, including his own, he walked over to the cane lying near the counter. He bent down, picked it up, and looked at it for a moment. It was small, light, old. He turned and walked back to Evelyn's booth. Her eyes met his. The room held its breath. He set the cane on the table, gently, just as Jason had asked. His voice came out low, roughened, unsure. "I shouldn't have taken that," he said. Evelyn nodded once. "No, you shouldn't have." He swallowed. "And I shouldn't have talked to you like that." Her gaze softened just slightly. "No, you shouldn't have." He shifted his weight. The leather of his jacket creaked. I'm sorry." The word sounded foreign in his mouth, like it hadn't been used in years. Maybe it hadn't. Evelyn didn't let him off easily. "You're not apologizing to an object," she said. "You're apologizing to a person. Look at me when you say it." He forced himself to. "I'm sorry," he repeated, for disrespecting you." Evelyn studied him for a long, quiet moment. Then she gave a small, tired smile. "Young man," she said, "I'm older than your grandparents. I've had people aim worse at me than your words, but I appreciate the attempt." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Jason watched all of it without stepping in, without pushing, without gloating. He didn't need this to be about him. It never was. The bearded biker cleared his throat. I'm sorry too," he muttered. Didn't know who you were." "You shouldn't have to know," Evelyn replied. "Decency shouldn't be reserved for veterans and heroes. It should be for everyone." He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks. The blonde biker with the scar shifted uncomfortably. "We'll pay for whatever we broke." Marla finally found her voice. "You can start with mopping that floor," she said, pointed but not cruel. Jason almost smiled. The bikers looked at their leader. He looked at Jason. Jason gave the faintest nod, not approval, not forgiveness, permission. "Do it," the leader said. So they did. It was awkward, clumsy, almost comical. 5 rough men in leather jackets, bent over with wet rags and an old mop, picking up napkins and wiping lemon water off the floor, righting chairs and setting the napkin dispenser back on Evelyn's table. But slowly, the tension started to bleed away. Earl sat down again, his hands finally relaxing around his newspaper. Marla refilled Evelyn's mug with hot water and fresh lemon, setting it down gently. "On the house," she whispered. "Thank you, dear," Evelyn replied. After the floor was clean and the chairs back in place, the leader walked back to the booth one last time. "May I ask you something?" he said awkwardly. Evelyn looked up. "You may." "Why'd you help him?" he asked, nodding toward Jason. "Back then, you didn't know him, could have let the doctor move on, could have saved your strength for someone else." Evelyn smiled faintly, eyes distant for a moment as memories flickered behind them. Sand, tense, the smell of antiseptic and dust and blood and fear. "Because," she said softly, "I didn't fight so only some people would be worth saving. I fought for all of you, even the ones who wouldn't appreciate it, even the ones who'd grow up and forget." The leader swallowed. His jaw worked, but no words came out. "Now," Evelyn continued, her voice gentle but firm, "the question is, what will you do with the life you're so eager to keep?" He didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time, he seemed to understand that he needed one. He stepped back. "We'll go," he said. We won't come back here, not like this." Evelyn nodded. "That's a start." Jason moved aside, giving them a clear path to the door. As they passed him, the leader paused. "You could have heard us," he said quietly. "All of us, easy." Jason shook his head. "Nothing about this is easy." "Then why didn't you?" the man pressed. "Men like us, we don't usually walk away from days like this." Jason held his gaze. "I've seen enough men not walk away, didn't feel like adding to the pile." The leader stared at him for a second, then gave a short, almost respectful nod. The bikers left the diner one by one, the bell above the door chiming gently after each. Engines roared back to life outside, then faded as they rode away, smaller, quieter, stripped of some of the swagger they'd rolled in with. When the last rumble disappeared down the road, the diner seemed to exhale. Marla set the coffee pot down with a clatter, her hands finally free to shake. "Well," she said, voice trembling a little, "that was something." Earl blew out a breath. "I ain't seen a takedown like that since." He stopped, then chuckled to himself. "Truth is, I ain't never seen a takedown like that." Jason turned back to Evelyn's booth. "You all right?" he asked again. She looked at her refilled mug, her slightly shifted plate, her cane resting safely within reach. "I'm fine," she said softly. "A little rattled, but fine." She paused. "You move slower than you used to." Jason gave her a wry look. "I get that a lot." "Still fast enough," she added. He allowed himself a small smile. "You always did give the harshest feedback with the softest voice." She leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Thank you for coming." "You called," he said. "I told you once, anytime, any place." Her eyes softened with something between gratitude and sorrow. "I never like calling in favors." "You're not," he replied. "You're cashing in a promise." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Marla approached the table cautiously. "Can I get you something, sir? Coffee? Breakfast?" Jason shook his head. "I'm all right, just passing through." Evelyn frowned. "You just prevented a full-scale disaster on a Thursday morning, and you're not staying for toast." He hesitated, then sighed. "1 cup of tea," he conceded. Marla smiled, coming right up. He slid into the booth beside Evelyn, across from the seat the leader had taken minutes earlier. It felt different now. Lighter, like the booth itself had reclaimed its rightful occupant. "Do they know," Jason asked quietly, "the town about you?" Evelyn shrugged one shoulder. "Some know, most don't. It's all right. I didn't serve for people to say thank you every day. I served so they could live days like this without thinking about men with guns at the door." Jason glanced at the entrance. "Doesn't always work out that way." She followed his gaze. "No, but sometimes you get people like you walking through just when you're needed." Marla set a mug of tea in front of him. He nodded in thanks and wrapped his hands around it, letting the heat soak into his fingers. "I hate seeing them like that," Evelyn said after a moment. "The bikers?" Jason asked. She nodded, so lost in anger, so convinced that power comes from scaring people smaller than them, Makes me think of the boys I saw over there, full of bravado until the first shot fired. Then they realized how small they really were. You got through to them, Jason said, more than you know. She chuckled softly. If I did, it's because you gave them a reason to listen. People like that don't hear words unless they're attached to consequences. Maybe, Jason said, but they'll remember yours longer than they remember mine. She looked at him, her eyes old but still bright. Do you think they'll change? He took a sip of tea, staring into the middle distance. I think, he said slowly, that everyone has one moment that could turn them around if they're paying attention. Might have just been theirs. The rest is up to them. She nodded, accepting that answer because she knew better than anyone that you can't save everyone. You just save who you can. After a comfortable silence, Evelyn said, You know you didn't have to come. Yes, Jason said quietly, I did. She smiled. You always were stubborn. Learned it from the best. She reached out with one thin, veined hand and patted his. For what it's worth, she said softly, I'm glad you made it through that night. Not just for this, but because I always hoped the young man on that cot would live long enough to figure out what kind of man he wanted to be. Jason's gaze dropped for a moment. And he asked, Think I did all right? She studied him, then nodded. I think, she said, you've spent a lot of years cleaning up messes you didn't make. That counts for something. He didn't know what to say to that. So he just sat there, sipping his tea, letting the warmth spread through a body that had too many scars and not enough rest. Eventually, he slid out of the booth. I should get going, he said. World's still out there making new messes. Evelyn sighed softly. It always will. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, plain, unmarked except for a number. He set it beside her phone. In case the world tries to bring one to your table again, he said. She looked at the card, then at him. You know I'm not going to live forever. I know, he replied. But as long as you're here, I'd like the world to remember that some people are not to be touched. She smiled a little sadly. You can't protect everyone. No, he agreed, but I can protect the ones who saved me. He leaned down and, in an uncharacteristic gesture, pressed a light kiss to the top of her head. Take care, Evelyn. You too, Jason, she whispered. Find somewhere to rest that isn't always a battlefield. He didn't answer that. Some questions didn't have solutions, only better days and worse days. He nodded to Marla, to Earl, to the couple in the corner who'd watched everything in stunned silence. Then he pushed open the diner door. The bell chimed. The sky outside had cleared a bit, sunlight breaking through the clouds, painting the parking lot in soft gold. The bikes were gone. The gravel bore temporary scar marks from their tires. Jason walked to his car, opened the door and paused for a second, looking back at the diner, at the faded sign, the dusty windows, the booth where a 100-year-old veteran sat with her back straight and her cane upright, still here, still fighting in her own way. He nodded once, to no one in particular, and got in. The engine started with a low rumble. As he pulled onto the road and drove away from Willow Creek, he felt something he didn't feel often after confrontations. Not triumph. Not relief. Something softer. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that just for a moment, in a small diner on a forgotten highway, the world had remembered how much one elderly woman mattered. Not because of what she'd done in a uniform. Not because of medals. But because she had lived, loved, and given everything she had, and refused to be treated as anything less than worthy of respect. The bikers would ride on. Maybe they'd go back to their usual haunts, their usual habits. But somewhere in the back of their minds, there'd be the image of a trembling hand dialing a number, and the man who walked in when they thought no one was coming. And if, years later, one of them put his hand on the shoulder of some other kid about to make the same mistake and said, You don't know who you're dealing with, that would be enough. Evelyn picked up her phone again after Jason left. She didn't call anyone this time. She just held it, remembering the sound of his voice on the other end. Remembering the young soldier on the cot, eyes stubbornly open because she'd told him to keep them that way. Her hand trembled a little more now, but there was still strength in it. Because strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how hard you can hit. Sometimes strength is a century-old woman making one phone call, and a man who answers without hesitation. Elders deserved that. Not pity, not dismissal. Respect. Always. Evelyn took a sip of her now cool lemon water, looked out the window at the road where the dust had finally settled, and let a small, satisfied smile touch her lips. She wasn't invisible. Not today. Not while Jasonstatham still picked up the phone.